Welcome to American Food Stories. Today, we're heading into the middle of the country, Iowa. Cornfields, flat highways, and a state most people fly over without a second thought. But underneath all that corn, buried in the rich soil, is one of the most quietly influential food histories in America. This is a story of a butcher's shortcut that became a legendary sandwich, a candy store problem that created a global dessert format, and a pizza feud that's still smoldering nearly a century later. We're looking at 10 foods with real dates, real inventors, and a stubborn refusal by almost all of them to ever leave the state. Let's get into it. We start our journey in Muscatine, Iowa. The year is 1926. A butcher named Fred Angel is standing behind his counter, facing a classic butcher's dilemma: what to do with all the loose trimmings of ground beef that aren't quite enough to form a perfect patty. Instead of waste, Angel saw an opportunity. He began experimenting. He seasoned the meat, but instead of searing it, he steamed it, low and slow, for hours, until it was so tender it just fell apart. He scooped this steaming, savory pile of meat straight onto a soft bun, topped it with nothing but a sharp line of mustard, a bit of ketchup, and diced onions. There was no patty, no defined shape, just seasoned meat piled as high as the bun could possibly handle. He called it the Maid-Rite. And in that same year, he opened the very first Maid-Rite shop. Now, nearly 100 years later, Maid-Rite locations are still serving that exact same recipe across Iowa, some of them in the very same buildings they started in. This loose meat sandwich, sometimes called a tavern, became a Midwest staple that most of the country has never even heard of, let alone tasted. Let's rewind a few years to 1920 in Anawa, Iowa. In his small candy store, a man named Christian Nelson kept seeing the same thing happen day after day. Kids would come in with their money clutched in their hands, paralyzed by indecision: chocolate or ice cream. They'd buy one, eat it fast, and then come right back for the other. Nelson became obsessed with solving this problem. He started working on a way to coat a solid block of ice cream in a layer of chocolate that would actually stick, instead of just sliding off into a greasy puddle. It took him dozens and dozens of failed attempts, a parade of melted, chocolate-covered messes, before he finally cracked the formula. He called his creation the ice cream bar. A year later, he partnered up with a chocolate manufacturer you might have heard of, Russell Stover, and together they renamed it the Eskimo Pie. It became the first mass-produced chocolate-covered ice cream bar in American history.
And it's the direct ancestor of nearly every frozen novelty on a stick that exists today, from ice cream sandwiches to fudge pops. All of it thanks to a candy store owner in a small Iowa river town. Now we jump forward to 1941, just outside of Newton, Iowa. We meet the Maytag family. And yes, it's the exact same family behind the washing machine sitting in laundry rooms all across America. They decided to try something completely outside their wheelhouse. They had their own herd of award-winning Holstein cattle, and they decided to use that rich milk to make blue cheese. But they didn't build a sterile, modern facility. Instead, they started aging the massive wheels of cheese in limestone caves carved deep into the hillside behind their dairy. They let nature's own heat and humidity do the ripening, instead of an industrial climate chamber. It took months just to get the texture right, to get that perfect crumble. It took even longer to get the flavor right, that signature sharp, tangy bite. The result? Maytag blue cheese became one of the very first American-made artisanal blue cheeses to earn genuine national respect, at a time when most serious cheese lovers assumed anything worth eating had to come from a cave in France, not a dairy farm in central Iowa. Our next stop is Des Moines, sometime in the 1950s. The exact origin story here is a little hazy. Accounts differ on whether it happened first at Vic's Tally Ho or at a rival spot called Johnny and Kay's. These two competing Des Moines restaurants were in a constant culinary arms race, each trying to outdo the other. But the dish that came out of that rivalry is not in dispute. It's called steak de Burgo. It's a beef tenderloin, pan-seared in a screaming hot pan until the crust is a deep, savory brown. Then it's finished in a rich sauce of either butter or cream, absolutely loaded with garlic and a fragrant mix of Italian herbs like basil, oregano, and thyme. It sounds like something that belongs on a menu in Tuscany, but it was invented in Iowa by Iowa cooks for Iowa diners. And for 70 years, it's remained almost completely unknown outside the state, even as it became a permanent beloved fixture on Des Moines steakhouse menus. Let's go back to the early 1900s to small-town Iowa. Long before food trucks and gourmet sandwich shops turned pork belly into a national trend, Iowa diners were already perfecting the art of the breaded pork tenderloin. The process is an act of beautiful aggression. You take a cut of pork and pound it thin, so thin you can practically see through it. Then it's breaded, deep-fried to a perfect golden brown and served on a bun so comically small that the meat hangs off every single side by inches. Norwalk, Iowa's Tip Top Cafe is one of the most cited early claims to the dish. Now, the state of Indiana will argue quite loudly that they got there first, and that fight has genuinely never been settled. But what's not up for debate is that the Iowa State Fair has served pork tenderloins as a signature item for generations. In a state built entirely on the back of pork farming, that kind of loyalty was never really a coincidence. We're in East Davenport, Iowa, November 1972. A restaurant owner named Lawrence Whitty, known to absolutely everyone as Happy Joe, opens his own pizza place. He'd just left a job where his boss wouldn't let him experiment with the menu. Now on his own turf, he started playing with toppings nobody else in the pizza business was even thinking about. Eventually, he landed on a combination that would stick for good. Seasoned taco meat, crisp shredded lettuce, diced tomato, sharp cheddar cheese, and a drizzle of taco sauce, all layered onto a pizza crust instead of a tortilla. Taco pizza was born. Happy Joe's is still serving it today, more than 50 years later. The dish has become such a genuine Iowa staple that Taco Pizza Night is a real, recurring tradition in homes all across the state, not just something you order for takeout. Back to Davenport, early 1900s. We meet a jeweler named Otto Rohwedder. During the day, he worked with precious stones and metals, but in his evenings, he was tinkering with an idea that sounds simple but was mechanically a nightmare. A machine that could slice an entire loaf of bread at once, cleanly, without the whole thing collapsing into a pile of crumbs. He was so confident in the idea that he eventually sold his own jewelry stores just to get the funds to build it. Then, in 1917, disaster struck. A fire tore through his workshop, destroying every single blueprint and every prototype he had. It set him back years. But he didn't quit. He eventually rebuilt and finished the machine, bringing sliced bread to the market in the late 1920s. By that point, Rohwedder had moved to Missouri, but he was born and raised in Davenport, and Iowa has never once let go of the claim. The next time somebody calls something the best thing since sliced bread, that phrase exists because of an Iowa-born jeweler who lost everything once and built it all over again. Now we head to the Quad Cities, a cluster of towns straddling the Iowa-Illinois border along the Mississippi River. Sometime in the mid-20th century, local pizzerias in Davenport and Bettendorf started developing a style of pizza completely different from anything happening in New York or Chicago. It starts with the crust, thin, crispy, and made with malted flour that gives it a slightly sweet, almost cracker-like snap. The sauce has a distinct cayenne pepper kick that catches you by surprise. And maybe most famously, the entire pizza is cut into long, thin strips instead of triangular slices. It became known as Quad City-style pizza, and it has stayed fiercely, stubbornly regional for decades. You genuinely cannot find it made the same way anywhere else in the country, and the locals will tell you that's exactly the point. Next is a dish with no confirmed inventor, no single date, but absolutely no shortage of Iowa pride: sour cream raisin pie. Its history traces back through Amish and Mennonite baking traditions that took root across rural Iowa generations ago and never really left. It's a rich, custard-style filling loaded with plumped, softened raisins and a distinct, delicious tang from sour cream. It's topped with either a billowy, toasted meringue or a woven lattice crust, depending on whose kitchen you're in. At the Iowa State Fair, it remains one of the most fiercely competitive baking categories every single year. It's one of the most quietly beloved desserts in the entire Midwest, all without a single famous name attached to it. And we close with a dish that nobody can quite explain to someone who didn't grow up with it. Take canned pineapple chunks, a bag of mini marshmallows, a tub of whipped topping, and a handful of chopped Snickers bars. Combine it all, chill it, and serve it in a big glass bowl. That is Snickers salad. It's not really a salad in any sense of the word that matters. It is a Midwest potluck institution with no clear inventor and no clear date of origin. It simply exists, a product of decades of church basements, family reunions, and holiday tables across Iowa where somebody's aunt shows up with a bowl of it and it disappears in 20 minutes flat. It sounds like a joke until you understand that everyone at that table is completely, 100% serious about it. So, there you have it. 10 foods from one state that most of America still thinks is just corn and flat highways stretching to the horizon. A butcher figuring out what to do with loose meat, a candy store owner solving a chocolate problem one melted attempt at a time, a family that made washing machines and also, somehow, made world-class cheese in a limestone cave. Iowa didn't invent any of this to get famous or to chase a trend. It invented food because people were hungry, resourceful, and stubborn enough to keep trying until something worked. And that's exactly why almost all of it is still here, unchanged, generations later. If this one surprised you, subscribe and tell me which dish you didn't expect. I'm betting on the Snickers salad. Stay curious.